morning. I'd like to call the Hillsborough County MPO meeting to order. Will everyone please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance and invocation?
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Our gracious and heavenly Father, we're so thankful that you touch us with your loving hands to awaken us to see another one of your beautiful days. We ask you to be with us today as we make decisions to make this county the best it possibly can be. Father, we ask that you be with those in El Paso and Dayton, Ohio, that lost their loved ones. Put your comforting arms around them. Let them know that you put no more than they can bear. Father, we pray for this nation and its healing. We ask you to protect those that put their lives on the line for us each and every day, whether they're in military uniforms or first responder uniforms, that you find that you take them back to their homes at the end of their service to find everything safe and sound. When our work is done here today, we ask you to take us back to our homes and find everything safe and sound. These are all blessings we ask in your righteous and holy name. Amen.
Amen.
Again, good morning, everyone. Good morning. We have the minutes from the June 11th, 2019 meeting. We have a motion to approve those minutes.
So moved.
There's a motion and a second to approve the minutes of the June 11th, 2019 meeting. See no further discussion. All those in favor, let it be known by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, likewise. Motion's adopted. Recognition of Vision Zero heroes. Ms. Torres, good morning.
Good morning. Good morning. So I didn't know exactly what I was getting into. I was accepted an invitation to be part of a teaching classes at some summer school camps or summer camps, one at Tampa Heights Junior Civic Association, the other at Dowdale Middle School in Palm River. So between the Planning Commission staff, teaching urban planning, and my classes on Vision Zero and bike and ped safety, we spent 24 days through June and July talking and listening to like over 50 kids in their awkward like 11 to 14-year-old stages. And I found that the grandmother and me could give them candy, and that got them to really, pay attention to what we were doing. But if I just show you, I'm going to loop through this video so you can see some of the pictures at the, hold on. At the culmination of the summer camp, we wanted to highlight some of the lessons learned. So there was a festival, and if you could there's some fantastic pictures, and then I'll loop through if you miss seeing some of them. But the Tampa Police Department Bicycle Operations and Response Unit generously accepted our request to host a bicycle rodeo. So they showed up in numbers with their trailer, with bicycles and helmets. And they set up a skills course and properly fit helmets to the kids that were there, and gave away over 25 bicycles that were also donated by On Bikes. So they were also another one of our heroes to the Tampa Police Department and On Bikes. We also painted an intersection, and it was based on the student designs from the summer camp. I had them submit art contest submittal. And the murals do help vehicles to recognize that there might be people around there on foot or on bicycle so that they can slow down. So we had an artist that had to interpret the design that the kids submitted, and her fees, the artist's fees, were paid for by two Tampa Bay chapters of two local transportation organizations, Women in Transportation and the Institute of Transportation Engineers. So they helped pay for the artist's fees. And lastly, the Planning Commission paid for the paint and the paint supplies. So accepting the Vision Zero Hero Award from Tampa Police Department is Officer Miller. Thank you. And then we're going to take a group picture in a second here. I don't know if Julius, you made it. Sorry, I don't mean to be sorry. Julius from On Bikes, and again, these are really chintzy. Thank you so much. We have Homa and Jennifer here from the WTS Tampa Bay chapter. All that. And Alex Bournes with the ITE. And who are you, sir? I don't know. Craig. Oh, great, thank you. I've been corresponding with Craig from George F. Young. He's also with the ITE, and they actually help pay for that artist's fees. So the Planning Commission, is Kiara here? What are you doing back there? Certificates for Kiara. The Planning Commission paid for the paint, and Kiara was my partner, not in crime, but she was my partner teaching the kids about the urban design courses that they learned mostly in June. So these are my Vision Zero heroes, and Wade, if you can take a picture. Should we have the chair? Yeah. Okay, all right, that's it. We want you guys up here. Mm-hmm. Come on this way. Thank you so much. Are you not getting up? It's just not room. Huh? Let's get back here. If it's
1, 2, 3. Hold on. Okay, a couple more.
Hope everyone got to see the pictures. It was a really great event. So thank you so much, you guys.
Good work.
Okay, thank you very much for that. Thank you for all that you've done for us. We appreciate it very, very much, Ms. Torres. Thank you very much. Now moving to public comment. Each person has 3 minutes to address the board. I have one card. I think this is Josephine Amato. Good morning.
Hi, good morning. Is there a timer there? I'm looking for the time. Good morning, how are you this morning? My name is Josephine Amato.
Thank you very much.
All right, you're done.
She was so good. I am the founder and director of Safe Bus for Us. We're a nonprofit organization in Hillsborough County advocating for student safe routes to school. And I'm here today to speak to you about the conversations we're having surrounding transportation. We cannot talk about transportation in our county unless we speak about one of the major causations to our congestion in our county, which is student transportation to school. Everyone think about what it's traveling in Hillsborough County during the summertime. Now close your eyes and picture next week. We will be a parking lot out in East and South Hillsborough and Northeast Hillsborough. And why? Because we are putting another 300,000 cars on the road, on some of our roads that are F-rated roads and D-rated roads surrounding all of our schools. We only transport approximately 70,000 students to and from school using the American school bus. The reason why Safe Bus for Us is called Safe Bus for Us, because when you place your child in a car seat, they will survive a crash 70% more. When you place your child on a school bus, their chances of surviving a crash is 7,000% more. The American school bus is a life-saving intervention. We lose 4,000 children during school travel hours every year. That is the #1 cause of our children's deaths in America are crashes. We lose 9 passengers on the American school bus annually, nationally, for the last 20 years. That has not changed. That is the difference, 4,000 lives versus 9 lives. We continue to have conversations surrounding transportation, but we do not speak about the #1 form of transportation in Hillsborough County, which is our public school bus transportation to public schools. I'm fully supportive of funding HART. Public transportation is vital to access jobs, school, and for our impoverished communities. However, children do not belong as a primary transport to school on a public transportation bus. That is not the answer, and I hear those conversations happening. I'm a girl from Spanish Harlem. I've been taking public transportation to and from school since I was 5 years old. You will be hard-pressed to find a child in New York City who has not been inappropriately fondled on a bus or a train, who has not witnessed violence on a bus or a train. That is not who we are. That is not where we want to go. HART is not the answer to public school bus transportation to public school. Our school bus drivers are highly trained. We have video cameras on our school buses, and it's a controlled set of population. We have a transportation tax that's up in the air right now. I understand that. We have about 12% that goes towards pedestrian paths. There's room in the budget to add more towards safe paths surrounding our 2 miles to school. And I want to hit home a little harder because Safe Bus for Us mapped out every single registered sex offender in the 2-mile radius of all of our schools in Hillsborough County. My son actually wrote the program to put it all together. And many of our schools, we have about 40 schools that have over 200 registered sex offenders on their path to school. Middleton High School has 364 registered sex offenders in the 2-mile radius of that school. That is on the path of our children's school. We have the second highest pedestrian death rate in our nation for the last 10 years. We need to change what we're doing, and we need to have a full breadth of conversation to include student safe paths to school. We pay our taxes for educational taxes for public school bus transportation. We pay for county transportation as well. We need to have a full conversation. Thank you for listening
you.
today.
Chris Vila?
Good morning, everybody. My name is Chris Fellow, live in Ybor City, 33605. Just to echo a little bit of the previous speaker that was here before me, I usually look at statistics. I like doing that just to see where our deficiencies are and how we can improve ourselves in society and how we get to places and so forth. And if you look at the CDC, the number one killer of children is actually car crashes. That has been reported, I think, in 2016, maybe on 2017. But the point is that it's been elevated. And so we have to do something now. We have to do something to provide services. One of the inspiration points of why I'm here at the podium today is because I had limited bus service where I lived. So as a young boy, I had to cross Stone Mabry a few times, and then I decided, you know what, the heck with it, I'm just gonna ride my bike. I wanna be complete control of what I do. And it was probably very dangerous. I know my mom was freaking out at the time, but I had a better sense of what the problem was and the value. So a lot of great things that she said before me. But my reason why I'm here today is just to talk about the state of repair. There was a report that was included in your agenda. And I want to talk a little bit about how my neighborhood is pigeonholed in this as one of the lowest ranking of all neighborhoods. In fact, it seems kind of odd that some parts of my neighborhood was left out. But anyways, I'll go into the specifics here. On page 4 of that report, the road conditions in my neighborhood, so like 11th Avenue, 10th Avenue, 10th Street, they all rank the lowest in the county. I can tell you it's like a moonscape out there. My neighbors prefer to have brick back. We think that's more durable, but it's horrible. I reported to the city. I tried to call the mayor's office. Nobody's reacting. A lot of it is just fast cut-through traffic from the interstate. The other thing that I wanted to bring up is there was a statement in here that said that while the reliability on the majority of the interstate is meeting statewide standards, so this is our interstates, the portions running through the urban core are moderately to severely unreliable, meaning at certain times of day, travel time may increase by 50, 100%, and it's because it's running through the city. We know that the solution to that is to expand the lanes. I'm sorry?
Yep.
Oh, that was my time, huh?
That was your time.
Okay, sorry.
Thank you. Thank you. Is there anyone else wishing to address us at the
3 minutes is
particular point in
supposed to
time?
be, yeah.
Anyone else? Did you fill out a card, sir? I don't see a card for you.
Good morning. I just wanted to.
What's your name, sir?
Excuse me?
Name, I need your name.
My name is Tom Mixon. Okay. And I just wanted to bring up a subject as far as the transportation goes. I know that the previous people that just talked before me had issues on the roads and how congested they are. My idea, and it was in the National Geographic, La Paz, Bolivia has put in cable cars, and these things stretch throughout the whole city. They move literally hundreds of thousands of people a year. It's very cost-effective, solar-powered, quiet. People can text, they can talk, they can do whatever they want. It takes the students to their universities, has tourists that bring them into different areas of interest, humanities, arts, sports, things of that nature. And it's something that I think Hillsborough County especially could use, because every day we see accidents on the road. People, for example, Howard Franklin backed up with an accident today in Gandy, 50 minutes to cross Gandy. With these cable cars, you could do it in 10 minutes. It'd be downtown and safe, secure, no stoplights, no traffic congestion. And the cost is relatively a lot cheaper than putting in massive layerings of interstate and crosstown expressways. And I just wanted to say that Mexico City is another one that is doing it. La Paz has like 16 lines in there, cost $3 Bolivianos, which is the equivalent of 43 cents American. Also, these cable cars are color-coded so that the people know, for the tourists or for students and things of that nature. But it's something I think that really, I know Atlanta is looking at it. Three suburbs around Atlanta are thinking about putting in gondolas, which are a much bigger car. But the cable cars actually move more people and it's more cost-effective. Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir. Anyone else wishing to speak to the board this morning? Anyone else? Okay, we close the public comment. Thank you very much. The committee reports online comments. Ms. Torres, I'm sorry.
Morning, Mr. Chairman. I'm Bill Roberts. I have the pleasure of serving as the chairman of your Citizens Advisory Committee as an appointee of the Aviation Authority. I'd like to give a brief report on the activity of the Citizens Advisory Committee. Under the public comment of our most recent meeting, Mr. Camarillo Soto introduced himself and expressed strong interest in filling the Hispanic at-large position on the CAC. He is a local professional engineer, briefed the COC on the safety benefits of modern roundabouts. The CAC at its meeting participated in the It's Time Hillsborough survey for the 2045 plan. Under action items, the Citizens Advisory Committee moved 2 items recommended to this board. They recommend the appointment of Mr. Soto, who is an attorney, to the Hispanic at-large seat on the CAC. And we unanimously approved the Temple Terrace low-speed electric vehicle study, which I believe is on your agenda for today. Under new business, the CAC voted to endorse the idea of a joint board meeting with the MPO, HART, and TBARTA to look at what's taken place in Orlando in terms of advancing utilization of the CSX corridors for transit. This is an item that has come before our committee on several occasions, and I know that this board took some action to set up such a meeting. We certainly encourage you to pursue that. Upcoming items include 2 things. One, we're going to have our November meeting at the THEA office and tour the traffic management system, which I think will be not just enlightening, but also interesting to all of our members. And then we're also planning an evening workshop for the Citizens Advisory Committee on September 24th, so that we can have a little more informal discussion of the items that are coming up in the next few months. I'll be happy to take any questions, and I thank you again for the opportunity.
Okay, thank you very much, sir. Appreciate that. Ms. Torres, comments and reports online.
Yes, I'll cover the rest of the other committees besides the Citizens Advisory Committee. For today's consent items, the Policy Committee approved and forwarded the USF Fellowship Contract Renewal, and your committees approved and forwarded the updates to their membership on their committees. The Temple Terrace Low-Speed Electric Vehicle Study as action for today was approved by all of the committees. In addition to participating in the It's Time Hillsborough survey, the BPAC also held its annual retreat in July, and they identified future topics and discussions. The TAC held a workshop on the technical analysis of the 2045 needs assessment. They were briefed on congestion forecasts for major roads and offered comments that you'll hear at your next meeting when you also discuss that topic. The ITS, Intelligent Transportation Systems Committee, brainstormed ideas for an update of the upcoming ITS master plan. The Policy Committee received an overview of how managed lanes in other cities are performing and clarifying the process of updating the TIP priority list with consideration of a nighttime workshop in advance of the TIP hearings and requiring action by local agencies, legislative bodies as a prerequisite for prioritization. The Transportation Disadvantage Coordinating Board approved the annual update of the Transportation Disadvantage Service Plan. A meeting was announced for August 28th, hosted by DOT with TBARTA, Hillsborough, Pinellas, and Pasco Counties transit agencies to discuss further partnership opportunities. The MPO Chairs Coordinating Committee held a public hearing and approved the annual update of priorities for the regionally significant multi-use trails and the Transportation Regional Incentive Program projects. The CCC also heard status reports on DOT's multi-use corridors for regional economic significance initiative, Pasco County's Connected City project, and TBARTA's Regional Transit Development Plan. They reviewed changes, the CCC did, to the interlocal agreement creating the CCC to distinguish their area and scope from TBARTA's, and reestablishing a separate entity for the CCC and established several subcommittees, including the Tampa Bay TMA Leadership Group. The changes were well received and will be referred to the individual MPOs for consideration prior to the next CCC meeting in December. That was it for the committee reports. Your online comments from, there were no Facebook posts today for today's meeting. There were just a handful of emails. Ray Shermonti shared a letter that he had sent to the BOCC on encouraging support of the referendum as approved by the voters. Mr. Mixon also emailed us about his research and support for the cable cars in La Paz. And Mike Lamarca was sharing his concerns that when more bike, walk, and Vision Zero attention be given to unincorporated Hillsborough County, he was encouraged to get more involved with various groups and request presentations. There was an email correspondence between Mauricio Rosas and HTV about broadcasting meetings live on YouTube, and we learned that we actually do that. So that's been going on since 2018. So those are the emails that we received and online comments.
Any questions? Thank you. Have a motion to approve the consent agenda.
So moved.
Question.
I'm sorry, you have a question?
Committee appointments, I have, I'm sorry, a late submission from THEA for our representative of the Citizen Advisory Committee. I'd like to add, if I could at this time, so pull the committee appointments out of the consent agenda and consider that separately.
Okay, is there an objection to pulling the committee appointments out of, seeing none, okay. All right, sir. Yes.
I don't have an objection. I have another.
Well, hold on, let's finish this, okay. So you want to, well, let's take up the item on the consent agenda and then
Yes,
take
sir.
that up, okay? So we've already pulled the committee appointments out of consent agenda, so the only thing we have left of consent agenda is USF Fellowship Contract Renewal. Is there a motion to approve that as a consent agenda?
So moved.
Motion and a second to approve the consent agenda being only the USF Fellowship Contract Renewal. Seeing any discussion? All those in favor, let it be known by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposers likewise. Now, the committee appointments. Mr. Wagner.
Yes, sir. THEA's appointee resigned from the Citizen Advisory Committee back in February. We found another person very interested in providing that community service, Ms. Lindsay Eggsware. I would like to have her serve on the Citizen Advisory Committee as THEA's nominee.
Okay. Any objection to that? We're just taking his recommendation. We're not approving the committee. Any objections to that? Okay. Commissioner Kim.
Thank you. I just wanted to respond or ask a question to Ms. Torres with regards. Well,
We're
it was
not-
the last statement she made. and
Not
you-
on that right now. We want something else now. We have to come back to that.
It was the last statement, and she made it in 2 seconds. And
We're going to have to come back to that because we're on the committee appointments now. Okay.
oh, okay. I'm sorry. I thought we were finished the
No, we're
committee
not.
appointments. Okay, sorry. Sorry.
Any other committee appointments we need to make addition to these? Okay, seeing none. We have a motion to accept the committee appointments. Are you following what we did, folks? Let me tell you what we did. He had an appointment, and we took the committee appointments out of the consent agenda. We approved the consent agenda. Now we're going back to the item that was pulled from the consent agenda because it's not on the consent agenda any longer. He added someone to a committee appointment. So now what we have to do is approve that. So I need a motion to approve the committee appointments.
So moved.
A motion to approve the committee appointments in a second. Is there any further discussion? Seeing none. All those in favor, let them know by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed likewise. Motion adopted. Now let's revert back to committee reports online. Ms. Torres, you have a question.
Thank you. I know you said about the YouTube broadcasting, which I think is incredibly important, but I'd just like to bring the attention to, because I was contacted so many times, and I know that I contacted you the evening of, what I think was our most viewed and community interested hearing, which was our nighttime hearing. And there was an hour which started as if it would be broadcast, and I believe that there was an hour missing, and I got lots of complaints. It wasn't carried for the first hour. And I know I checked in with you then, and it still didn't get on for about an hour that evening or longer. So I just would like to make sure that I'd like to bring that to public attention, because I was concerned about it that evening, and it didn't somehow get handled. And I think it's really important, because I wouldn't have known except that my office got several complaints.
Yes.
Thank you for bringing that up. We did have an opportunity to sit down with HTV after the hearing to find out what happened there, and it turned out it was actually a glitch with YouTube. So the HTV had done everything that they normally do. And so the reason why citizens couldn't view the meeting through YouTube was because of problem with YouTube streaming. YouTube isn't always tremendously responsive to little folks like us. So, you know, there were definitely emails that were sent in from us to try to get that resolved. They just didn't respond right away.
Thank you.
I have a question. So if YouTube if they were not able to record it at that time, it was still recorded by HG. Okay, so that could be added to the YouTube file at a later date?
So it's in our archive.
Okay, has it been published in YouTube yet?
I will double check.
Oh, so if we run into a glitch, I would think that a good policy would be, if we've got the recording, to add it to it or just put it in segments so that people can view it at a later date.
We typically do have it up in our archive, available on our website. Yeah, we typically do have those videos up on our website under our archive.
Okay, great, thank you.
Okay. All right. Move to action items. General Planning Consultant Contract Amendment. Trim.
So, I will move it. So moved.
Oh,
Or-
I have a presentation.
Oh, I'm sorry. God, I'm really missing it this morning.
I have a brief presentation. My name is Jeff Trim with Sam Schwartz Engineering. We have a general planning consulting contract under the Renaissance Planning Group. We are a subconsultant to them and has a contract with the MPO. So this request is to add 2 job classifications to our contract rate sheet. The first one is a Chief Engineer 2 classification. That rate is meant to be added to the contract so we can have Sam Schwartz, the president and founder of our company, work on future MPO projects as needed. The second rate is an engineering intern. We just did not have one in the original contract, and that's a new person that we've hired recently. That would be added to the contract rate also. So again, I would ask that the board approve the contract rates for the Chief Engineer 2 and the engineering intern.
Is there any questions, Mr. Trim? Yes, come on. Mr. Smith, you recognize.
Hi. Can you just briefly explain your relationship of your company with Renaissance? Is it just a funding thing we're going through now, or have you worked with them before? Do you work together, or?
Yes, we've worked with them on several projects, and under this contract, we worked with them on the Vision Zero action plan.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
I have a question. Is either the rates set forth in the agenda item, those are the raw rates, or is there a multiplier?
No, those are raw rates. There's a multiplier that's applied to that.
Okay. What is the multiplier?
It's, our multiplier, I think, is 2.66.
6.6, okay. Thanks.
Any other questions? What's your pleasure?
I'll move it.
I have a motion by Commissioner Kemp, second by Commissioner Smith to approve the General Planning Consultant Contract Amendment. Seeing no further discussion, all those in favor, let me know by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, likewise. Motion's adopted. Thank you.
Thank you.
Temple Terrace Low-Speed Electrical Vehicle Study.
Good morning, board members. This is the Temple Terrace Low-Speed Electric Vehicle Study. My name is Wade Reynolds, MPO staff.
It's $10.
You're getting a discount.
This study originally started to look at some crossings of major state roads in Temple Terrace. As you all may know, Temple Terrace is one of the first, if not the first, planned golf cart communities in the country. It is very important to their brand to be able to have their citizens access the golf courses and potentially to get to other locations such as schools, grocery stores, or other recreational opportunities via golf cart. So the purpose was to look at 7 potential intersections for golf cart crossings. These are all on state roads, Fowler on the north and 56th Street on the west there. And look at some other examples around the state where successful crossings have been implemented, such as Sun City Center in Dunedin. So looking at the locations of registered golf carts in the city, there were a total of almost 600 from 2013 to 19. There are currently not many on the either north of Fowler or west of 56th. But that may be sort of a chicken and egg thing, because currently those people would not be able to access the golf course from their area.
I'll be adding one soon.
Yes, sir. So the city is following up with a survey of those residents and of the existing golf cart owners to determine what locations they might be interested in accessing. So I'll move through these crossings relatively quickly, but as you can see, only one of them appears to meet all of the warrants. That would be Whiteway Drive at 56th Street. That is a somewhat old traffic count, so we will be asking the city to follow up with a peak hour traffic count in the morning before we submit an application to FDOT based on that. But starting at the south, Temple Heights Road at 56th Street, it does have some constraints. The sidewalks are close to the street near 56th. There are drainage concerns, a lack of a pedestrian crossing on the north side of that intersection, steeper grades east and west of the intersection, and it does not go to a public right-of-way on the east side of the street. So there were some crashes at that intersection, a total of 40, two of those being pedestrians. The missing warrant is, in this case for FDOT approval, is that the side streets are missing an exclusive left turn lane and an exclusive shared through or right turn lane. Mission Hills Drive at 56th Street, there is a good amount of right-of-way and separation of sidewalks. There are challenges with utilities, and the westbound travel lane does not have an exclusive left turn lane. That is the missing warrant. The traffic counts would meet it in this location, and there are a low number of crashes with 0 bicycle or pedestrian crashes, mostly rear end and turn movement crashes. That is the total crashes over a 5-year period. Serena Drive at Druid Hills Road at 56th Street. This does not currently have a signalized intersection, which would not meet FDOT standards. So we would need to either add a full signal intersection or some sort of mid-block crossing. Really, the recommendation here would be that this is a great spot for a pedestrian mid-block crossing, but probably not the best spot for a golf cart crossing without that signalized intersection. Whiteway Drive at 56th Street, there are some opportunities to decrease the turn radii. Plenty of right-of-way. It also connects the Greco softball complex and connects the Temple Terrace Family Recreation Center. There is somewhat low buffer between the sidewalk and the roadway at Holland Avenue, however, and the traffic counts are approaching what the limits are for FDOT's approval. This also did have a higher number of crashes, more than double at some of the other intersections that we looked at, and it does have a long crossing distance due to the curb radius, particularly on the east side. It appears that there are no missing warrants, but again, this one we would ask, because of an old traffic count, to take another look at those counts before we move forward with an application. Moving on to Fowler at Raintree Boulevard. There are some good opportunities that it is close, as it is close to a lot of commercial options near Fowler and 56th. We would need to address missing sidewalks in this location, and it would be a little tough to mix golf carts with traffic on Raintree Boulevard. So the other challenge here, and the main missing warrant, is that it is 6 lanes of traffic plus turn lanes to cross. Currently, we have not seen any variances issued for a 6-lane highway crossing in Florida. The max is a 4-lane highway so far. So again, there have been some crashes here, including one bicycle crash. It is a very long crossing distance, and the peak hours do exceed the 200 vehicle per hour limit imposed by FDOT. Moving on to Gillette and Fowler, again, we would be crossing a 6-lane roadway. We would potentially be, if this were to be considered, there is an option to move golf carts onto a wider sidewalk, have a shared crosswalk crossing, and get across the road that way. But that would need to be explored a little more, and it would require, again, a variation from the 6-lane crossing. Another option could be to bring cars along Fowler Avenue and go under the Fowler Bridge at the Hillsborough River. This would require some environmental study, as there would need to be a pathway extended out over the water in this location. There is no crossing distance limitation here, though, and no volume of traffic to contend with. So just to recap some additional things that we looked at with FDOT, we will be following with any application all the signage and marking requirements. FDOT is reviewing the signal timing plans, and they would need to review and approve any crossing of those intersections. So the next steps, as I mentioned, an origin and destination survey. We will be trying to prepare a proposal and concept for one crossing on 56th Street. That would ultimately be followed by a one-year safety study on that crossing to make sure that there's nothing out of the ordinary there. And depending on which crossing is chosen, there could be the need, if it uses Hillsborough County roads, to amend Hillsborough County's golf cart ordinance to allow roads in those locations. And we will certainly coordinate with FDOT on any additional facilities. So if there are any questions, I'll be happy to answer them. We are asking for your acceptance of the study.
Commissioner Overman, you recognize.
Thank you for your report. In looking at your preliminary data, it would appear as though those roads that are FDOT roads, the difference between the crash data on the Temple Heights versus the Mission Hills, it appears as though just basic safety design would change those numbers significantly. To have an intersection with that much traffic on it without any crossing aids is a problem. I mean, all over Hillsborough County, including the cities, we have issues with telephone poles in the middle of right-of-ways and, ADA non-compliant roadways that do need to be addressed. But in the design, we could probably fix that and make those roads possibly available. But the other observation is in the comparison of some of the roads that did seem to be either too wide or would be a problem due to traffic counts. It looks like speed would be a bigger factor.
Certainly the speed on Fowler in particular would be a big factor for safety there.
Okay, and so the city and the county has no way of determining speeds as it pertains to urban areas where there's pedestrian and bicycles. Is that correct?
I believe the controlling jurisdiction has those, which in this case would be FDOT on Fowler.
Right, because I know we've had and heard over the years many people in communities where there is an FDOT-controlled road that are highly frustrated by speeds that well in excess of safety factors in their areas. And a project like this would exacerbate that point, would make the point in a good way. And I can see how it's really possible to redesign these communities these intersections to make it better. But without addressing speed, I'm not sure we're going to get where we need to go. So as long as that is a very high level of negotiation with FDOT for the process, I think it's almost, in some cases, a little challenging to make those roads where speed has been the leading indicator of the crash, that we make sure that we negotiate with FDOT on the speeds on those particular roads.
Thank you. Yes, understood.
Mr. Kemp, be recognized.
Thank you. This is a great project. I like people having other ways to get around, and I think this is a really a great look. I know that in Gainesville now, it's like even 2 or 3 years ago, it was scooters were everywhere there. I mean, small, like motorcycle, moped type of things, and apparently they're now all over New York. And I'm like looking at golf carts as well as those kinds of things. And I echo the sentiments expressed by Commissioner Overman in terms of looking at this. But there is right now, and I think maybe the Secretary could address this, we're under review now, or there's a project on Fowler Avenue to be looking at the lanes on Fowler Avenue, I mean, I know I've seen designs out there and heard some statuses about it over time.
Yeah, we actually have two studies going on. One is on Fowler, the other is going to be part of the BRT study that will look from USF to downtown. And so we're actively looking at options of different treatments we can provide on Fowler that would tighten the road up, perhaps put some features like Commissioner Overman said on the speed reduction. And so that's all being looked at right now. We are doing some projects right now. One of the challenges we have is the speed limits are, how we set speed limits is state statute. We adopt the METCD from the federal government. We have to follow that, and it says what we need to do. So we got to get creative when we want to reduce the speed, because the speed limit is based in part on what the speeds that are operating currently are. The theory being that if you just drop the speed limit down, people aren't necessarily going to start going slower because of that. I think we'll, on Bush Boulevard is our first one. We're working with law enforcement. We're putting in some design features to try and slow traffic down by putting in narrower lanes, putting in some other, if you want to call it disturbances along the road that make people feel I should be going slower. And so as we start to implement these projects, we can get the speed limits hopefully down in some of the higher pedestrian urbanized corridors where they're pretty high right now. But we've also we've given some money to the Tampa Police as well as Hillsborough County Sheriff's Office to help us enforce those areas as we're implementing it so that we can try to get the behavior change. So, but we are working on that.
And also just in terms of for HART and the future for transit, and I see Fowler Avenue, as I've said many times before, being a big transit way, which it is not currently, which is, I have an issue with that. But when you look at studies from across the country, the number one or one of the top Vision Zero or pedestrian traffic, pedestrian bicycle safety measures, indicators is a robust transit system, which makes total sense because those are people that are using the bicycles and walking and using transit and just a culture of awareness about this. So I think if we can have robust transit on Fowler Avenue and be looking at the redesign, I see that as all being kind of being part of this. And so I appreciate that looking at the golf carts and everything. So I just wanted to kind of bring that together,
And we're
find out
studying
how
the
that was.
circulator, the USF circulator that could utilize some of the, there's a big right-of-way out on Fowler. We know that it's
I know.
it's not a very friendly road right now, and we're going to work to change that.
And the other thing every time I drive to the university area, without fail, I see someone in the bike lanes that are unprotected in a wheelchair. All the time, every time. Sometimes they make it to the sidewalk and they go that way, but it unnerves me every single time. And that's also a huge need in that area that maybe it's not something that we think of so much, but I see that all the time besides the bicycles.
Okay, Mr. Green, you recognize.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Maybe this is a question for Wade, but does this study sort of suggest that these designated crossings for golf carts may in fact be more heavily utilized by not only by pedestrians but others who choose other means of mobility, personal mobility, let's say, and does this lead to a safer situation in terms of, I don't know, trying to concentrate on these particular locations to get across these really busy streets?
I certainly think there's an opportunity if we're making improvements to an intersection to make improvements for all users. So there's definitely that possibility. The costs associated with that, I can't say what it would be, or the needed improvements without taking a further look at those for improvements for other users, but I think there's an opportunity to do that.
Okay, thank you. And one more point about the speed that was brought up a moment ago. Wasn't the speed limit reduced on North 56 between Fowler and Fletcher
Yes,
recently?
it was with the installation of those two rapid flashing beacons. That segment of 56 is actually a county-controlled roadway.
Okay.
South of Fowler is state.
Okay, thank you. All right.
Any other questions? I'm sorry. Yeah,
Mayor Jurado sent an email yesterday, which she would like shared with the board, if that's all right. She says, regrets I'm unable to attend Tuesday's MPO meeting. Temple Terrace is in the midst of budget meetings that I'm unable to step away from. I did want to thank the chair and the director for the work that has been undertaken to support the first golf course community in the country. Temple Terrace enjoys, as part of our legacy, the status of being the first planned golf course community in the nation. We're very supportive of this study that will allow our community to remain connected via golf carts. Looking forward to continuing to work with the MPO and FDOT to keep my community connected. Regards, Mel Jurado.
Any other questions, any other discussion? Have a motion to accept the
Motion to accept.
motion by Commissioner, Mr. Green, second by Commissioner Overman. Seeing no further discussion, all those in favor, let me know by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, likewise, motion is adopted. Yes, Mayor Jurado could not be with us today, and I want to ask you to keep her in prayer. Many of you may know that she lost her husband on June 28th, Mr. Rod Jurado, who was very active in Hillsborough County. Please keep her in prayer. I would like to have a motion to move from new business to potential cross-appeal and transportation surtax litigation from new business to action item. So Mr. Clark can explain to us what he has on his mind. So is there a motion to do that?
So moved.
So motion and a second. Motion by Commissioner Kemp, second by Councilman Citro to move that item. Seeing no further discussion, all those in favor, let them say aye.
Aye.
Motion likewise. Motion is adopted. Mr. Clark.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, board members. This item, and I'll be very brief, is regarding the Surtax litigation. And this item arose late last week, so I wasn't able to bring it to Policy Committee. It is time sensitive, so briefly, as you're aware, the Circuit Court upheld the transportation surtax that was approved by the voters in November 2018 as an amendment to the county charter. That decision is being appealed by the plaintiff in the case. The defendants in the original lawsuit, including Hillsborough County, Hart, the cities of Tampa and Plant City, and the state of Florida, have either already filed cross-appeals to preserve their rights in the appellate action or have indicated their intent to do so. This item is to request a vote of the MPO board to direct its legal counsel in this matter to file such a cross-appeal on behalf of the Hillsborough MPO. Legal counsel is being provided in this case by Attorney Alan Zimmett of Bryant Miller Olive, who also represents Hillsborough County in this litigation. This item is being added to today's agenda because the filing deadline for cross-appeals is 2 days from now on Thursday, August 8th. I would suggest the recommended wording for this action could read, consistent with previous MPO board action, to direct legal counsel to file a cross-appeal in the subject litigation in order to preserve the MPO's right in the present appeal regarding the transportation surtax that was approved by the voters in November 2018.
Are there any questions? Are there any questions? Mr. Green.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm not quite sure what cross-appeal means. What do you?
Sure. Our litigation chief for the county attorney's office here, he can probably answer those procedural questions for you.
Okay.
Morning, board members. Rob Brazel, Chief Assistant County Attorney. Essentially, a cross-appeal happens when someone else has already appealed first. I mean, just to put it simply. And what the defendants are doing in this case is essentially preserving their rights to argue anything that we may want to argue in the appeal, and that may be responsive to what Commissioner White says in his briefs. But essentially, I mean, obviously the defendants are not going to argue that Judge Barbas got it wrong in upholding the constitutionality of the tax. It may be that some of the defendants or all the defendants may want to argue that he struck through certain provisions of Article 11 that we wish he hadn't, things of that sort. But it's not intended to be anything to argue against Judge Barbas's ruling in upholding the tax itself.
Thank you. Thank you. Any other questions? What's your pleasure?
So moved.
Motion by Commissioner Kemp, second by Mr. Green to cross appeal, I guess is what it is. Cross appeal.
So I was like, what's the motion?
Right.
Yeah.
Whatever it is,
Yeah.
it sounds good.
Seeing no further discussion, all those in favor, let me know by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, likewise, motion is adopted. Thank you, Mr. Clark. Appreciate it. Status reports. Tampa Hillsborough Expressway Authority Connected Vehicle Pilot Project Phase 3. Mr. Fry. Morning.
Good morning. My name is Bob Fry. I'm the planning director over at the Tampa Hillsborough Expressway Authority, 1104 East Twig Street. I'm here this morning to give you an update on the Connected Vehicle Pilot Deployment Program, which we've heard about. We'll first start with why THEA is involved with connected vehicles and emerging technologies. As you know, it's a given that technology is going to change, and the last big technological change we saw in the toll industry was the move from the toll booths to all electronic tolling, and that made an enormous difference in the amount of capacity that we're able to have on the roadway, as well as the safety along the toll booths of people having to stop and stuff. So we're always looking for, it's a responsibility to look for the safest, most efficient way to provide transportation for the residents of Tampa Bay. So looking at the next and upcoming technology, we decided to go forward with putting in an application for the connected vehicle pilot deployment in 2015. THEA was lucky. We were lucky enough to be selected as one of 3 pilot sites in the United States, along with New York City and Wyoming. Wyoming DOT is specializing pretty much in freight out on the interstate. We were looking at basically the transition from from where limited access facility comes into a downtown, and we used the Meridian Avenue corridor for that, which was a very good location, being that at the end of it, you come to Amalie Arena, we have the cruises and all the residential development that's going in there, so there's a lot of interactions there that we're allowed to do. The pilot deployment in 2015, we did 1 year of planning, 2 years of design and deployment, and we've actually gone live this year. We are actually the only site right now that has an operating connected vehicle system. We are generating data from real people that are out there and moving forward with our partners. The City of Tampa, HART, FDOT stepped up immensely, thank you, Secretary, on the Florida Avenue corridor with $499,000 worth of video that we needed to help make some of the technology work. And then we also have private sector partners, Siemens, H&TB, and Brand Motion. One of the things that we're finding from generating this data is that one of the benefits of using the Selman Expressway for this type of analysis is if you look at the frequency, for connected type vehicles, you can have 1 million connected vehicles, but if they only get in your study area, if they only get in the area once a month, it's useless. You need to have frequency in there. And one of the things that the Selman Expressway, especially the reversible lanes, has been able to do is we're showing remarkable consistency Monday through Friday. We're showing almost 50% of our participants and higher in our study area every Monday through Friday. It drops off a little bit on Saturday, down on Saturday and Sunday, and it comes right back. That frequency is providing the Center for Urban Transportation Research at University of South Florida, who's doing our performance measurements, really good data and real good consistency on that. As I said, that the THEA overview, what we're looking at are, we have a variety of different use cases that we're looking at on how connected vehicles can work with mobility, safety, and also the environment. They're also looking at how carbon emissions are taken as part of this as well. We are unique in that we actually have 800, we're allowed up to 1,200 privately owned vehicle volunteers that are users on the Selman Expressway that decided to take part in this. You know, we offered them a $550 toll discount for the time period for their trouble. But these are real people, real commuters that are using and providing the data. We also have 9 of the streetcars are connected, and 10 of the HART buses, along with our network of 44 RSUs. FDOT has 2 additional RSUs that are outside of our study area, and the City of Tampa is going to be putting 60 in as part of a future project that they're working on right now. So it's really, we've been having a really good, this is a very good example of multiple agencies working together trying to come up with a transportation system. The drivers that we're looking at, this is how we basically have gotten the messages across using a mirror. Everybody who drives knows how to use a mirror, even my 16-year-old son. So they can we didn't use tablets or anything of that sort because we wanted to make sure that people kept their eyes on the road, and we didn't want to. You try to keep people as close to their normal day-to-day operations as they are, and so that's why the mirror played into that. This is a picture of one of the streetcars. In the upper right, you could see the tablet that we put up there for the drivers so that they are aware of pedestrians around their vehicles turning in front of them. Same thing with the bus safety. We were able to do that. And in the upper right, you could see the warning that the drivers get. And the types of use cases we're looking at there, intersection movement assist, which basically is trying to make sure we don't have T-bone crashes. It warns both drivers that a potential conflict is coming. One of the things that's different about our CV project versus others is the technology has reached a point where it only gives a warning if a crash or an incident is imminent. If not, you will not get a warning. And that's a huge increase from the old binary systems of either it was on or off, and you got a lot of false positives, and people lost faith in whether or not the data was working. So we've made huge, the technology has really made a big leap. We, as we said, have used the participants from the Selman Expressway. One of the reasons I wanted to put this up here was we had to reschedule 3 times along the way based on technological issues that came up with. We lost 30% of our participants every time we had to reschedule. And what we found out from that basically is that, when you're going to go and we're going to do these projects, we need to make sure we're ready to go and not start, stop, that there's definitely you're going to lose a lot of participation at that point. So the benefits that we're looking at for connectivity on why we're involved this was we believe this is the entry-level technology for smart cities. It also provides the ability to provide all of the benefits from this emerging technology to the full transportation system. So through connectivity, we're able to take a regular driver's interactions, pass it on to the public transportation system, pass it on to the streetcar system, and then pass it on to the pedestrians and traffic signal system, so everybody benefits from this type of technology, not just those who have the technology in the vehicles, which is to us is a very big portion of this that we're looking at. And what we're looking for is security. The technology we're using is DSRC, direct short-range communication. It's the same technology we use in tolling out there. We've been using it for decades, and we've been protecting people's security for decades, and we've also been able, it has high accuracy. Just to give you an idea, we miss approximately 3 transactions per 100 million, which is 99 out 959s. That type of accuracy. So that's one of the reasons we chose the technology, and we're comfortable going forward with this. And basically what we're looking to do here is make it a safer, more efficient system. As you can see from this picture here, our 44 roadside units basically cover about 80% of the city of downtown. The city and DOT will be filling in the rest. That's given us a pretty good coverage area for future development of this tech. This is just some examples of the technology, of the data that we're generating right now out there. This is live data right now. 84% of our participants are coming through the Meridian Twigs intersection, and we're able to show that. That's not surprising. We're using toll people to do it, but it is showing that we do have connectivity. We do have interactions that are going, and it is matching what we're seeing on the real traffic network, so we're very optimistic about that. We've also got twigs in the courthouse. We have a pedestrian system set up over there, working using other technologies to help the connected technology along until we get enough connected vehicles to make things really work. And that's one of the things we learned here, is that we can use our existing technology that's out there right now, the video cameras, LiDAR, radar, and other technologies, to help set ourselves up for future jumps in technology when it's really ready, and how we can do that. This is, for example, this is over on the reversible lane segments. The graph on the right is a heat map. That's the 7 to 8 p.m. peak that you can see. Once again, as I said, it matches reality. We want to make sure the electronic world matches the real world for the data to really mean something, and that's one of the things that we're showing here. This is showing our AM and PM peak, that not only are we providing the connectivity, but it's also providing transportation planning data that we're able to use for future operations. And finally, all this data is going to US DOT, and it's being used at the federal level to help make decisions on connected vehicle technology and where we go. So Tampa is part of the equation, trying to figure that out, working with the city and FDOT and our other partners as well. So this has really been a national and international type of project for Tampa, and we have been shamelessly promoting Tampa every chance we get when we go up there on the Hillsborough County area. Thank you very much, and I'll be more than happy to answer any questions, but that's where we're at right now, and this project will go till May of 2020 is when we end providing data for US DOT.
Any questions, Mr. Fry? Commissioner Smith, you recognize.
This was only opted-in participants, the study was? It wasn't, or did it also include data from all the tolled vehicles?
No, ma'am. It's only opted in. Every vehicle that is taken part of this has what they call an onboard unit. You can tell engineers name this: roadside unit, onboard unit, creative. But they have the onboard units have been put in the vehicles, and we made sure that the onboard units are totally separate from the vehicles. What they call the CAN bus, the brain of the vehicle. So there's no connection. It's 100%. Standalone, connected into like the turn signals and things like that to find out how they're moving. So it's 100% voluntary, and all of the personal information is protected and at multiple levels throughout this. So to us, it's only a dot moving in a certain direction at a certain speed. There's no way to tell who it is without an extraordinarily concerted effort.
Thank you.
The onboard unit is actually that mirror he showed you.
Yes.
That's an electronic device that communicates to the roadside unit. And all that data also flows back to the Traffic Operations Center that the city runs within our building.
Thank you.
Mr. Kemp, you recognize.
Thank you. So does the roadside units that kind of like pings to the cars or something like that, is that what the roadside units do?
Yes, it's very similar to a computer with a security certificate. We load up security certificates in the onboard unit and in the roadside unit, and they talk to each other. One of the things that we're doing in Tampa that no one else has done before is all the firmware and software can be updated over the air. There are 4 RSUs on the Selman that do nothing but interact back and forth, and every time you have a certificate, it makes sure that handshake takes place, and if it doesn't, it will not allow it to go further than that.
So I was curious, I know you said LiDAR and radar, but when I saw the pedestrians picked up on that, because, I mean, there's, from the automated vehicle world, we're hearing that decades and decades out, and one of the big stumbling blocks is that they can't anticipate pedestrians. It doesn't work in pedestrian traffic very well, and we know that there's examples of that. So I was just wondering, are the people that you're picking up as pedestrians, do they have something on them? Do they have to walk in a certain painted crosswalk, or how is it that the pedestrian part of it works?
They have to walk in the crosswalk because the LiDAR is covering the crosswalk. We've increased it 2 feet on either side to make sure we catch everybody. Basically, the LiDAR identifies the person very accurately or where they're at. We tried originally to use cell phones, but the GPS in the cell phone is not accurate enough. It's within 3 meters, which is great if you're using ways to go from New York to Seattle. That's fantastic, but putting a pedestrian in a crosswalk can make the difference between putting them in the crosswalk and in the middle of the street. So we had to use another technology. So it very accurately puts them there, talks to the RSU, and then pushes it out upstream and downstream to all vehicles that there are pedestrians in the crosswalk. It worked really good at the courthouse because it's one of those ones where you step out in the road randomly and everything stops. So we had to get that data out there. So yes, we are using other technologies to help. There's definitely some opportunities in the future with the micros, the scooters, how to getting them connected to the system to let them know. So there's definitely a bunch of opportunities coming up on that.
And is there anything, this is a thing that it just makes sense to me with what we have available in apps and smartphones and everything else. And in carpooling or multiple users in a car, in terms of hot lanes where people are discounted, like the old HOV lanes, or given free passage on the managed lanes, it just seems to me like there should be coming up in technology some way to track multiple passengers via smartphone or something like that, rather than the kinds of, because I keep hearing that's a problem, but I'm just wondering, is there anything that is looking at that?
We did not look into that at all, so I really would not be able to speculate.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Commissioner Overman, you recognize.
Thank you very much for your presentation. I love the idea of actually investing in technology in order to help people get around more safely. And I know that we've had some challenging in funding in ITS, for technology in terms of improving traffic flow that's unrelated to this particular project. In the technology that's being implemented here, is there a competition for the same set of dollars for the ITS systems versus this kind of system, or do they complement each other? So if we had, for example, on Hillsborough and Florida and all the other streets that may not be part of your study area, if our technology systems that actually helped with managing traffic flow for our buses and cars and others that aren't part of this system, can it complement the data that you're collecting long-term?
Yes, there are actually complementary technologies and treatments out there right now. For example, you'll hear the term TSMO, Transportation Systems Management Operations. Actually, at the THEA meeting this week, Metropolitan brought a TSMO coalition agreement to us wanting to on the I-4 corridor. Those strategies right there all complement the future emerging technologies and ITS and how we're moving together. This project right here is a very first legs on trying to figure out the policies going forward. In the future, yes, it'll all be connected, and the dollars will basically flow as as an independent local toll authority. The bottom line for us is it's got to work. If it works, there'll be dollars there to support it. If it doesn't, then we'll be moving on to the next technology to find out what does work.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not just something we're going to do for the sake of doing. If there's value there, then we will pursue it. If not, then we will look for other things, and we're going to be using these TSMO-type strategies right now, working with FDOT and other agencies to try to make the road safer as it is.
Right. And the reason I ask that is because, we've learned that technology is always challenging sometimes when you have multiple players in the field. We don't want to end up in a Microsoft Word versus Apple war. Everybody's got this system and it doesn't talk to this other system. As a governing body, we want to make sure that things are working together well. So that was one thing. The other question I had, and this just because I probably haven't gone through the report well enough, but where are you installing these units that are the eyes and ears on the roads? So were they on power poles and telephone poles, which are problematic on our roads for our pedestrians in terms of helping people get around, or are they on buildings? How are you installing the units that are providing the signaling?
They're actually on a variety of different. It could be mast arms for signals. We have some that are on lights on reversible lanes, where we try to put as much as we can on our system because we do have fiber that we're able to run, which makes a huge difference in the speed and not having to rely on cellular for that. So it's basically what is out there where we're needed in the location. Also, as for your comment before that, USDOT is doing has learned some lessons from the past and is doing a very good job on interoperability, making sure that we've already had to last July go through interoperability testing with New York and Wyoming, so the vehicles in New York can work in Tampa and vice versa, and requiring that type of movement. So we're using whatever's available as close as we can, without having to put new poles up in areas, and then using fiber as much as possible and making sure everything's interoperable. That's the big
The hurdle.
Yes,
All
ma'am.
right, great. Thank you very much. I appreciate
Another
your
thing about that is as your jurisdictions update and replace their signal systems, you want to put in criteria that has an open architecture. So it has an eye toward the future that you can put different elements within those control boxes that aren't proprietary, so that you've preserved the flexibility in terms of being adaptable to the next line of technology that comes along. Because once you get into this, you're committed. Even though we stopped sending data to USDOT at the end of 2020, we're going to keep running this system. We're going to keep collaborating with DOT and the city of Tampa on those signal systems. So it's all about establishing the path now and maintaining flexibility as you go forward, so you aren't locked in.
Yeah, and well, you need the funding too, so.
You do. And the total project we're talking about here is $22 million. $17 million was a grant, about $4.5 million was THEA funds, and about $500,000 was DOT funds. And so we made a long-term commitment when we took this project on. And I do want to say that while there were stops and starts in terms of getting the onboard units installed, the project was developed and each step was implemented on time and on budget. So it was a great job by Bob, the project manager, and the rest of the team in implementing the project.
One other thing I'd like to add on that is we cannot put enough onboard units out to make a difference. It's just not possible. At some point, the automakers we're going to have to work with to roll their vehicles into these existing systems. And we did get approval for Phase 3. Right now, we're working with Hyundai to, they use the same technology to do that, to work with how would a normal Hyundai that you purchase at a dealership with connectivity be able to operate in that. And we're hoping by next May to be able to demonstrate that we're able to do that, because that's the next step. It's going to have to be an easy rolling of the existing vehicles, not a lot of hurdles to make it happen. So we're very happy that USDOT approved us, and Hyundai's our partner on that and going to be going forward. So that should be a very interesting move forward.
Any other questions? Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Fry, were you ever in the military?
Yes, sir.
What branch?
Army, sir. Yes, sir.
How long were you in there?
Just 4 years lower enlisted, but I think everyone should be lower enlisted once in their life.
I can tell how you carry yourself. You were service.
That's why it was done on time and on budget, sir.
Were you ever in the military? I said that's sir, buddy. Okay, the 2045 plan needs assessment for investment programs. Good morning.
Good morning, Board. Johnny Wong, MPO staff. I'm here to present you today with our needs assessment for our forthcoming 2045 long-range transportation plan. The MPO's 5 program areas are shown on this screen. Should not be new to any of you. We presented this many times. But again, these programs allow us to prioritize projects based on how much each project is expected to improve performance in these categories. The State of Good Repair and Resiliency program focuses on maintaining pavement, bridge, transit assets, and resiliency to major storms. The Vision Zero program focuses on roadway safety. Smart Cities focuses on reducing congestion using operational treatments like the presentation you just saw, rather than widenings. And the Real Choices When Not Driving category focuses on enhancing multimodal transportation options. And we have a 5th program category on this slide called Major Projects, which focuses on adding capacity to facilitate economic growth. This presentation is only going to cover the top 4 program areas and the future needs in each program category, because the 5th category, Major Projects, is considered using a separate process, and it will be brought forward to you at a later time. To assess how we're doing, we consider a variety of metrics in each area, and they allow us to figure out how these projects are going to perform in the future. So we begin by taking this information, assessing our performance today, and comparing that to what our performance could be in 2045 given the current level of funding. We then take that number and compare it to what the performance could be by 2045 with current funding levels plus a portion of the sales tax revenue. For the State of Good Repair and Resiliency, we measure repair and replacement schedules for pavement, bridges, transit assets, as well as the recovery time following a Category 3 storm and the economic losses avoided from those stormwater improvements. For Vision Zero, we measure total crashes, fatal crashes, injury crashes, and bike peg crashes. For smart cities, we measure the reliability of travel times and the hours of delay to be experienced. And for real choices when not driving, we measure people and jobs served by the bus system and the walk-bike facilities, as well as frequency of bus service. So beginning with the State of Good Repair and Resiliency Program, again, what we're doing here is looking at what we could get if the current funding trend holds through 2045 and comparing that to what would happen if we had current funding trend plus the sales tax. For pavement, the trend investment scenario results fall short of meeting our standard for resurfacing roads once every 17 years. With the amount of funding in the trend scenario, only 60% of our major roads would be resurfaced on schedule. Some roads would be resurfaced more often than that, but far more would be resurfaced a lot less frequently. And it works out that the countywide average would be resurfacing once every 28 years. Alternatively, under the Trend Plus scenario, all roads in the county, including local roads, collectors, arterials, and up, would be resurfaced every 17 years on average, thus meeting the guideline standard. Another element of this program is maintaining bridges in a state of good repair, which is essential both from an infrastructure and a safety perspective. We looked at the bridges that are currently listed in the capital improvements programs, and we assumed these bridges to be representative projects, allowing us to determine what the need and what the cost of the improvements would be. Using that information, we estimated that under the trend scenario, we could afford to perform all of the necessary routine maintenance on bridges and address some deficiencies by performing one major rehab or replacement project and one minor rehab or replacement project each year. Under the Trend Plus scenario, we could again continue that routine maintenance, but also get 3 major rehab or replacement projects and 11 minor projects. That would help us begin addressing the backlog of needs. The third element in this program is transit asset maintenance. These scenarios were identified based on HART's current passenger vehicle fleet, and we also coordinated with HART and utilized their 10-year transit development program. The trend scenario for transit asset maintenance results in a funding shortfall. That shortfall would prevent HART from replacing its buses once every 12 years. If that funding trend continues through to 2045, 10% of the fleet will be older than 12 years. The average bus age would be 9 years, and as a result, we would expect about 8 service disruptions each weekday. A service disruption is what is colloquially referred to as a road call.
You mean the bus breaking down?
Breaking down, exactly. There's a long technical definition for what a road call is.
It means no one's getting where they need to go.
Exactly that. The Trend Plus scenario, however, would allow HART to expand its fleet from about 200 buses to 283 40-foot CNG buses, while also replacing 100% of the fleet before they reach that standard of 12 years. The average bus age would be 7 years, and because of the younger age of the fleet, we would expect about half as many road calls per bus by 2045. The last element in state of good repair and resiliency is resiliency to major storms. This assessment was performed as part of a tri-county resiliency study, and it found that about 20% of Hillsborough County's network would be impacted by either a Cat 3 storm or high sea level rise, and about 11% of our network is vulnerable to a dramatic flood event, such as 9 inches of precipitation in a short amount of time. The current funding trend of $46 million per year allows the local governments and FDOT to invest in some stormwater improvements, but still a large percentage of our network is in a vulnerable position. So we have to ask ourselves, if we can't improve all of the vulnerable roads, where do we start? And that's where criticality comes into play. So with the current funding level of $46 million per year, plus an additional $22 million, we could improve resilience on highly vulnerable roads that are also critical, such as evacuation routes and roads that lead to hospitals and other necessary services. Beyond the $46 million per year, with an additional $44 million, that level of funding would allow us to make improvements on roads that are both highly and moderately vulnerable and also critical. Some of the treatments that this funding would allow us to pursue are raising road profiles, hardening substructures, adding more retention and detention ponds, depressing medians, and planting vegetation. Our next program area is Vision Zero, which focuses on safety. We presented this many times, so forgive me for repeating myself, but over the past 5 years, we've averaged almost 170 fatal and 1,600 serious injury crashes per year. Under the trend investment scenario for Vision Zero, we could reduce all crashes by more than 15%, which could prevent 25 fatalities per year by 2045. And under the Trend Plus investment scenario, we could reduce crashes between 30 and 35%, and that would result in more than 50 preventable fatalities each year. At the Trend Plus level of spending, by 2045, we could fund 500 miles of currently unlit roads, lights for 500 miles of currently unlit roads, fill in 1,400 miles of gaps and missing sidewalks, and do complete streets treatments on 350 miles of high crash roads. Our third program category is Smart Cities. This investment program, again, focuses on reducing congestion and improving time reliability by operational treatments, not by widening. We modeled congestion on our major road network and projected that if no improvements are made by 2045, delay could be as high as 2.8 times higher than what we see today, just due to the population increase. Thankfully, the capital improvements programs from our local governments show robust funding to tackle this problem. If the funding trend continues, by 2045, we can improve 130 miles of major roads, which would have the effect of reducing delay by 40% over 2045 levels and improving average travel time by 10%. But if we jump up to the current spending plus a portion of the sales tax, we could improve 220 miles of major roads. We could reduce delay from 2045 levels by 80% and improve travel time by 30%. With that level of funding, freeways could receive treatments like incident management, ramp meters to help control flow on entry and exit ramps, pre-trip and en route messaging, similar to what Bob Fry just presented you, weather and work zone management, and on the arterials, the cities and the county could implement treatments like video monitoring, expanding their intersection improvement programs, transit signal prioritization at more intersections, and loop detectors that help them retime signals on the fly given congestion. The real choices when not driving category includes projects which can facilitate multimodal transportation by improving access to transit services, building trails and side paths for pedestrians and cyclists, and improving options for transportation disadvantaged population. This program is particularly important for those who can't drive or don't own a car, many of whom live in our communities of concern. And to identify needs for trails and side path facilities, we looked at several criteria, one being proximity to communities of concern, another being population and job density near the facilities, level of traffic stress, and proximity to Vision Zero corridors. The higher the combined score of all four criteria, the greater the need for these facilities. Under the trend scenario, more than 600,000 people could be served by the walk-bike network, which by 2045, 600,000 people will be about a third of our population. This could also fund 50 miles of trails and side paths, including the Upper Tampa Bay Trail, Bypass Trail, Green Artery, and some others. Under the Trend Plus scenario, more than half of our 2045 population would be within a quarter mile's distance of a trail or side path. And we could build 3 times as many trails and side paths, which would equate to almost complete build out of the network. Almost done. To identify needs for transit and paratransit services, we looked at criteria like population and job density and frequency of bus service. We also, again, coordinated with HART to take a look at their 10-year transit development plan. And under the trend scenario, 22 routes could see increased service frequency. And under the Trend Plus scenario, we could fund 38 routes with increased service frequency, 7 new bus rapid transit routes, 5 new local routes, 3 new express routes, add service in South County and Plant City, 3 new transit centers, and new rail service. If we were to invest in the trend scenario, that would result in about 30% of people in jobs having access to great transit facilities, but 60% of people in jobs would have minimal service or none at all. Under the Trend Plus scenario, 90% of people in jobs would have somewhat frequent service or better. That works out to between 3 and 4 buses per hour or even more than that. And only 11% of people in jobs would have minimal service or worse. This is just a status update. We're going to be rolling up the needs assessment with the assessment for major projects and using both of those items to develop the cost feasible plan. So there's no action required of you today, but I'd like to open it up to questions, and either Allison, Sarah, Wade, Reynolds, or myself can answer them, hopefully.
Mr. Overman, you recognize.
Thank you for your report and an update. It's clear that we have an opportunity to make a difference in our community. Honestly, the voters helped us make that happen. So, but I do have a question regarding the trail and side path alternatives and how that impact, or was there a correlation made between the improvement in accessibility or ways to get places using the trails and side paths, and how that relates to the need for the children that need to walk 2 miles to school? I mean, has there been, is that part of the analysis that you've looked at, or was it just sort of overall?
It didn't look at specific areas around schools. It utilized the trail prioritization map, so basically the trail network map for future and potential trails and side paths. So that's an established network and map that we have, and so it looked at that and how we could, what of that established map we could prioritize and fund based on the funding buckets.
Understood, but I do think it would be a wise idea to take where our schools are located and see where there's some economies of scales that can be met. Mm-hmm. Because we are going to have to actually improve the safety for the children that are actually now by statute, thank you, unfunded mandates, to make sure these children have an opportunity to walk safely to schools. And clearly in the prior presentation, when we were looking at Temple Terrace and the crosswalks and lack of crosswalks in areas where people need to cross, if there's a school in that area, we need to make sure that we're taking that into consideration. Because I think safety and alternative mobility is obviously part of what we're looking at for the additional funding. But I think it's important that we not forget that there is a mandate for making sure children are actually walking to school. If we don't do that, we're not going to address the congestion issues we have at rush hours and the queuing issues that we have on school sites. And we will be remiss in recognizing that we don't have enough school buses to get everybody from the date where they live exactly to the school if we're going to be required to pick up every child. Mm-hmm. When that service has not been funded. So just a curiosity, is that part of the trail path scope of analysis at all?
Like I said, we can double check that as far as the map goes. I'm not as familiar as Wade is, but also based on the Vision Zero bucket or program, that does include a lot of sidewalk improvement funds. So those school improvements could also be covered through that category as well.
Great, thank you.
Mr. Lopano, you recognize.
Thank you, Chairman. On the slide where you talked about new bus service, you showed a picture of a Proterra electric bus. When you priced out the routes that you could increase, did you price it out using a Proterra electric bus or a regular natural gas bus, or how'd you do it?
We didn't actually do the pricing for the fleet for the buses, we relied on Hart's Transit Development Plan. So I believe that they assumed all buses would be 40-foot CNG. I don't know any more details other than that.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Kemp, you're recognized.
Thank you. Just to raise a couple points that I had raised in the policy committee meeting, and one was to do with induced demand. And as I had stated, the Katy Expressway in Houston is now the largest expressway in the nation with 6 managed lanes, 26 lanes in all. And what they found at 10 years after building it out like this is that congestion is back. A 30-minute, 35-minute ride out in the suburbs at night is now an hour and 45 minutes once again. So I'm just wondering, I mean, it's very scientifically documented. Is induced demand any part of these calculations, formulations?
The model, as we spoke about at the policy committee, was used for our congestion analysis. And it is sort of a direct path until that path is filled up, and then it sort of goes to the next path. And that's how the travel demand models are designed to work. We have a traditional 4-step model still. But that is, again, that major projects category that we'll be discussing further along as well.
And in terms of resiliency too, I was particularly wondering about ferry service and CSX in terms of emergency and resiliency.
Yes, we're looking into that and wrapping up the transit analysis. It does include the CSX. We had also the request in a previous meeting to look at the connections to South County and Brandon and Plant City. So those have been included in the analysis, as well as the water ferry.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you very much. Okay.
All right, thanks.
Bylaws amendments for ITS committee.
Me again. Johnny Wong, MPO staff. I'm bringing you a status update regarding a requested change to our MPO bylaws. At the July meeting of the Intelligent Transportation Systems Committee, the committee voted unanimously to add a seat for USF Center for Urban Transportation Research. That seat, the committee believes, would add a valuable and much-needed academic perspective to the committee's work. Adding a seat on any committee requires an amendment to the MPO bylaws, and in your agenda packet, we've attached a strike-through version of the bylaws, so you can see exactly what those changes would be. This is, again, another update. There's no action required of you today because a bylaw amendment requires 2 readings, this being the first, and so we will bring this to you next month for action. Any questions?
Over when you recognize.
We do a significant amount of contract work as a county with Qatar, which is terrific. They're awesome and they're wonderful, and it's great to have them at the table in the committee. But is that going to create a conflict of interest situation? That, and how, if so, how is that addressed?
Cameron, do you want to address that? I don't want to say anything that's incorrect.
Commissioner, I'm sorry, phrase the question again, please.
Well, I know Hillsborough County, as well as many other entities, do a significant amount of project work and study work with Qatar, and I think that's terrific. They're a great organization. Having them on this committee may or may not, and that's my question, does it create a conflict of interest? And if so, how is that going to be addressed?
I can double check that. This is just a committee to the MPO. They don't take any action on items. They essentially are just voting on items before them, but they're really just an advisory committee to the MPO. So they don't have any actual authority other than to provide information to the MPO board. I'll double check that, but my reflexive answer is no, there shouldn't be any issues because it's not a board that has any control. The committee itself doesn't have any control over any actions.
I thought so. I just wanted to make sure I was clear. Thanks.
Okay. Thank you, sir.
Thanks.
Executive Director's report.
Thank you so much. And we had a long meeting last time. So I did double check. We do have the video of the June 11th hearing, all 6 hours of it, live right now on our YouTube account if you ever have trouble sleeping. It was. There were a couple of motions at the end of the meeting that I wanted to let you know the status of. So one of those was a request for a joint board workshop with HART and THEA. And so I've talked with the directors of both of those organizations. THEA is still working through their regional transit development plan and their PD&E for their bus rapid transit corridor, so they'd like more time. But we do have a tentative, we have a save the date right now for a joint board workshop with HART. And so that is October the 9th at 9:30 in the morning. And so our topic will be, as discussed at our board meeting in June, focusing on how to advance transit jointly between the MPO and HART. This will tee up our long-range transportation plan so that it helps HART with advancing projects into the next phase of development. Our other action that was right at the end of the meeting was a request for a look at noise walls and how can they be designed to have the most positive impact on public health. And so we have asked one of our general planning consultants to do some best practices research and bring back some design concepts from around the country that can be considered. Now, there have been a number of board motions over the last few years at these TIP hearings about the downtown interchange in particular, about the supplemental environmental impact statement, and District 7 has been gradually working through all of those motions, requests for analysis, has been coming back and reporting to us. We are getting to the end of all of that analysis. And so next month, you will see a draft letter of comment, which uses as a jumping off point all of the MPO board's previous motions, requests for impact analysis, and how they've been addressed, and what we're seeing so far in District 7's reports back. So that'll be coming through our committees for review this month, coming back to the board at the September meeting. We also have a public workshop, our third public workshop about the MPO board's motions on the supplemental environmental impact statement. And that public workshop is going to be August 19th at the Saunders Library. It is an open house in the early evening. I think it's 5. It is up on our public calendar. MPO support for the Independent Oversight Committee. At our last board meeting, we had in our announcements an announcement of the first meeting for the Independent Oversight Committee scheduled for July 16th. That meeting was postponed because Judge Barbas's ruling took longer than anticipated. And then, of course, we did have an appeal. But we have circled back with the county attorney's office, and they have advised that until there is some other decision from the Supreme Court, Judge Barbas's ruling is the law of the land. And so what that states is that the implementing agencies for the sales tax will develop project plans for use of the sales tax dollars in the coming calendar year and provide those to the Oversight Committee by the end of September. So we are planning to schedule a meeting of the Oversight Committee to review those project plans, after October the 1st. And before that first meeting, we're planning to organize an organizational meeting for the Oversight Committee so that they can do things like approve bylaws, elect officers, review their charge, and so forth.
Yes. Thank you. So when are you planning to set this meeting for the IOC, the Organizational Committee?
Yes, ma'am. We are polling the members right now. We sent out a poll last week with a number of possible dates, and so we'll be scheduling it for the date that the most possible members can attend. We will have that information up on our website, so it will appear as an Independent Oversight Committee meeting on the calendar on planhillsborough.org.
As I said
Use your mic, use your mic.
As I said in the policy committee meeting, I think they may need more than one meeting, but it's certainly important that they have at least one meeting, possibly two. They have a lot of work to do before they receive the plans from Hart, the county, the 3 cities on September 30th. It's important that they be able to elect officers, set their bylaws, possibly communicate with those 5 agencies about the process for receiving the plans. So there's been, you're right, there's been some confusion among the MPO staff about whether or not to set a meeting, cancel a meeting. The meeting was canceled. It turns out that was a mistake. And I think there's kind of a problem because the charter actually says the MPO, which is us, will assist the IOC. And so I think it's our charge to be facilitating their meetings. And we're in kind of a little limbo area where the IOC has no officers because they haven't met to elect officers and be a body that can communicate as an agency. And the MPO staff has been making decisions without direction from the board. In fact, they sent a letter to the IOC without copying any of us. So we just found out about it accidentally at the budget workshop. And I don't know if any of the other board members even saw any of that exchange. So I think that besides electing officers and approving their bylaws and working out their process, they're going to need to, as I said, communicate with the 5 agencies about how to receive those plans, where to receive those plans, to the chair, P.O. box, to the staff of MPO to send it to them. So I think it's really important that they meet. In August, they have their initial meeting in August that would allow them to have an opportunity to possibly decide for a second meeting in September before they receive suddenly somehow all these plans from the 5 agencies September 30th. So I'm making a motion to have the board direct MPO staff to set an initial meeting of the IOC in August.
Second.
So that they can take that from here and really roll with it and possibly have a second meeting in September.
We have a motion by Commissioner Smith, second by Commissioner Kemp, for staff to have the IOC meet sometime in August.
Mr. Chair?
And again.
I'm sorry, when you have a chance.
Pardon?
When you have a moment, I was just going to speak to some of the items between the charter amendment and the interlocal agreement because I wanted to, this issue came up at policy committee, so I took a few notes in case this issue came up as part of the executive report. First of all, the area where the MPO staff is assigned as the staff to the IOC is the interlocal, as you stated. The charter amendment's actually silent on the issue. It only references the MPO in regards to the planning and development portion of the prospective surtax uses. It mentions the MPO would be the implementing agency there, and the MPO is the one agency that would not be submitting project plans to the IOC. Other than that, it's silent as to staffing in the charter amendment. But the interlocal agreement, to which this board is a party, assigns the MPO staff to serve as administrative support staff for the IOC. Let's see, it says the MPO provides staff to the IOC, provides transportation development activities, assistance, and assists in the IOC in carrying out its duties. It's not, I don't read that to mean that this board has to take a vote to have the IOC meet. The IOC is going to be required to meet pursuant to the terms of the charter amendment. As you stated, the deadline, the first deadline of any sort is the September 30th deadline for project plans for the implementing agencies. That means the IOC could meet any time before or after. It's just that, so there's no restriction onto when or how often that they could meet. The postponement of that initial meeting, Beth wanted to have a meeting, I forgot what the original July date was, but after consulting with our office, that was actually during the 30-day appeal window for Judge Barbas's decision, and we recommended that that first meeting be at least pushed until after that 30 days. And the reason for that was because if no appeals were filed, that means everything would be set in stone and everything would be good to go. Once an appeal is filed, then obviously this is still the settled law of the land, and so the IOC can meet and performance responsibilities that are required under the charter amendment.
So you're saying that really is there a need for a motion to have the IOC meet? They have to meet anyway between now and the end of September?
They will have to meet to review the project plans. When those aren't going to be arriving until September 30th. So they don't actually have to meet before that time, but they certainly can. It certainly makes sense to have an organizational meeting or two to discuss bylaws, election of officers, things of that nature. I'm just saying I don't believe this board has to take any action to make those things happen. I think Beth's already taking action in that direction pursuant to the email that was going to say just this last week.
So what's your pleasure, Commissioner Smith?
My motion stands. Our charter is the law of the land. Whether appeals happen or until things go on that may change it in the future, that's beyond my crystal ball or yours. Today, the charter is the law of the land, and the charter says the MPO will assist the IOC. I think it's unfortunate that their July meeting was canceled. I think they're going to need a lot of time, as I stated, for all the things they need to do before September 30th, 8 short weeks from today. As you said, the interlocal says the MPO provides staff support. I just want to make sure that the IOC is given an opportunity to meet in August, and from there, things will be a lot more settled. They'll have their own officers. They'll be able to set meetings and set their own agenda, and then the MPO staff can work directly with them. Right now, things are so in limbo. I think it's important to provide this little direction to get them over the hump, especially since there's been so much confusion. So my motion stands.
Commissioner Overman, you recognize.
I think this is an important dialogue, honestly, whether or not we move or not. But I do believe, and just having some experience in being on the CAC for the MPO and not being in leadership and not sitting in every single meeting that we've ever heard that talked about transportation and transit and everything else, the learning curve for the understanding of the various different allocations, the buckets, the purposes, the evaluation of the projects, all of those things are going to be a massive undertaking by those individuals who have stepped to the plate to serve as an IOC person. Whether or not the charter addresses their power or not, we are asking citizens who may or may not be transportation professionals but have an important role in our planning to organize themselves and be ready with a massive list of even our county board can't decide where the buckets are. And we do this, okay? So to the point that's made here, it isn't just a matter of putting together a board and figuring out the bylaws and who has power in there in terms of who's the chair, who's not. This is about having people that are going to be asked to take on a massive task with no real training or perspective. Having them have this report as our assessment of need that break down the various different categories and shows what the MPO has done as well as the other entities have reviewed, I think would be a valuable experience. But are we going to do that in 1 hour meeting? Are they going to have a half a day? I mean, this is not a small task. So to encourage them to meet as many times as possible between now and when they get this monster list from 5 different entities and then have to live within the interlocal agreement that we created for them, I think is an important way of helping them serve. We ask volunteers to step to the plate to give our governing bodies guidance on how we allocate, spend, and invest our resources that they've asked us to spend. I would like to encourage, however the motion flies, to encourage a point of view or a policy from this board, not to amend it, but that we give that IOC support, that committee, as much support as possible. And if it means a motion to set a meeting in August and September, that's fine. But I think as a policy, I think it's incumbent on this board to support those folks that have volunteered their time to serve our community and offer a voice so that we do what our citizens have asked us to do.
Okay. We have Commissioner Kemp, you recognize.
Thank you. I just want to thank you, Commissioner Smith, for raising this. I think it's really important, and I'm very supportive, and I appreciate the clarification. We had a public meeting where it was announced and where we first found out that, there was, at that time, what was put forward is that there would be no meeting by September 30. So I really think it's important on the record. I almost forgot because so much water has gone under the bridge, kind of behind the scenes in terms of addressing this, but I do think it's important to publicly bring it forward. I never understood why the IOC didn't go forward no matter what, because whether there were appeals or not, it stayed in place. So I didn't understand why there was any change at all. And I think it's really important in a public way to be there, and not only the practical implications of having that committee meet and learn and get this started, but secondly, for the public to understand that we are doing the due diligence. We had 57% of people vote on this. We've had a lot of public attention and discussion of it. We had a big deal. We had many, many applicants to this committee. And I think for us, I think it is important for us to make a public statement and for the MPO to take this action, so I appreciate you raising that.
Well, motion by Commissioner Smith, second by Commissioner Kemp. Seeing no further discussion, all those in favor, let it be known by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, likewise. Motion is adopted.
Very good. And then briefly, the next item in my executive director's report about the Civil Service Board dissolution. You do have your staff services provided to you through an agreement with the Planning Commission. The Planning Commission has been utilizing the Civil Service Board for a number of personnel matters for the last many years. So I just wanted to give you a brief update about how things like job classifications, leave policies, and so forth will be handled. The Planning Commission has hired a former employee of the Civil Service Board to become the personnel point person expert for the Planning Commission, and will be providing that to this board as well. Our next board meeting is September the 4th. Here on the 26th floor. Our next TMA Leadership Group meeting is going to be on September the 6th, not the 13th, and will be on the 18th floor in the Planning Commission boardroom. Thank you.
Joe, when you recognize.
It's a question relating to the next month's meeting. What is the policy with the MPO on being able to attend telephonically? I happen to be out of town that week, so that's why I thought with the holiday it would be pushed to the next week, but that didn't happen.
Yes, hello. I'm sorry, I keep moving because Commissioner Smith, we're on corner lots right here, so we don't have good microphone access. Pursuant to Sunshine, the way that works is if there are extraordinary circumstances, you can participate in a meeting telephonically. The important factor is there has to be a physical quorum present in order for that to happen. So you can't establish your quorum with a remote attendance, but if there is a physical quorum present, there can be an attendance that way.
The reason I asked is this is going to happen every year if we don't push it to the week after Labor Day. So I was just curious about what that option was, and I'll coordinate with what's possible.
Okay. Is there any old business? Any new business? Any monkey business? We're adjourned.